Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of the participants on today's webinar from Swift-Kanban. All of you should hopefully be able to hear me on the audio and be able to see my slides here. The webinar today is on increasing customer satisfaction with iterationless delivery by Dr. Masake Maeda, and it is brought to you by ValueAnnova and Swift-Kanban from Digitay. Just a few guidelines to get us started. So we expect a large number of audience attendees today. So in order to make sure that everyone gets a chance to interact with Dr. Maeda, we will take questions offline using the Q&A box that you will see on the bottom right of your screens. And if you could type in your questions as you hear the webinar, we will take the questions as they come up towards the end of the webinar after Dr. Masa's presentation. And in order to make sure that everyone gets a chance, we will try and limit it to one question at a time per attendee, and then go on to other questions, additional questions if there is time left at the end of the webinar. To introduce the speakers today, Dr. Masake Maeda is the head of ValueAnnova. I will talk a little bit more about him in a minute. I'm the host. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm co-founder and senior vice president of product at Digitay. To give you a quick overview of Digitay itself, Digitay is a pioneer in the web-based collaborative product solutions space for geographically distributed teams. We're headquartered out of Mountain View, California. We have over 250,000 users around the world, and our products cover lean, agile, Kanban, and ALM products, facilitating global teams to do software development, implementations, and projects around the world. Swift-Kanban is our flagship, lean Kanban product. Has been very successful, and great response from the audience seen it so far, the customers who have tried it so far. We've been around. The Swift-Kanban product came about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and we've had a great response from teams that are currently doing a variety of using a variety of software methods such as waterfall or iterative or Scrum, and are looking to Kanban for scaling agile to the enterprise. We've been recognized by Gartner in several forums and documents. Looks like we may be having some audio issues with Masa's line. Masa, if you're able to unmute yourself, go ahead and do that, please, and should be able to talk.
Okay, I just got the sound back on my end. Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, Masa.
Okay. All right. Should I get started?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. So we're going to talk about a topic within Kanban that I have seen, everywhere that I have been providing services. People ask about because they see it as an issue with adoption, as well as an aspect that has to do that raises a lot of confusion. So it's around the aspect of time boxing and delivering to customers on time. So let's begin just with a very gentle introduction. So we all know that projects are typically managed taking into account as hard parameters, timing, budget, and scope, which is based on the Iron Triangle, as most of you most likely know. And as Agile came to be, there was a shift in which what was being taken into account as the primary aspect was the scope. And then time and budget are played around with in order to be able to deliver to the customer, the scope that is expected. A couple of years back, Jim Highsmith published the second edition of his book on Agile management. He proposed what he calls the Agile Triangle, or the new Agile Triangle, in which the other three parameters that were being taken into consideration become, in this triangle, just constraints that need to be taken into account. However, what is of more important is the focus on quality and primarily on value to the customer. So this was actually a very nice proposal from Jim Highsmith. People started paying attention to it, and it has actually become very useful in, for executives in the determination on how to go about making decisions around how to make the project successful. Shortly after that, I proposed what I call the Lean Agile Prism, and it's actually a very simple structure, also three-dimensional. If you look at the right face of the prism, that's actually the Jim Highsmith's Agile Triangle. So what the Lean Agile Prism is proposing is that if we perform aspects of activities that have to do with innovation towards value to the customer, but also towards value to the organization or the enterprise, we will be able to deliver better value more quickly. And I think this is an important aspect to take into account, because innovation has to do not only with creating like new products, but it has to do with positive change that has a positive economic impact anywhere in the organization. Something that is discussed a lot within the Agile community is, how different what Agile brings to the table is from Waterfall, and how Waterfall is such a bad approach to development. In reality, it isn't. Why? Well, because, we say that when we talk about Agile, we have iterations. We have our sprint, we have our daily meetings. For example, in the case of Scrum, other approaches such as XP also have iterations. And we have found that that's actually, very powerful to be able to deliver value more quickly and earlier. But it also happens that the original proposal from Royce, who is the person who developed this waterfall approach, he himself in the same paper suggested the need for iteration. He actually made it clear that doing this once was definitely not a good idea. So I think it has been clear for a very long time that doing things once is not necessarily the best approach. It is just unfortunate that the way waterfall has been adopted, was in such a way that this very important aspect was ignored. So in the end, what I want to point out here is that, there is some value on having, these iterations and be able to deliver value in different fashions. So I think that what is really powerful about the way iterations are handled within the Agile universe is the fact of this concept of time boxing. We want to deliver small chunks of things rather quickly, in a far smaller amount of time than compared with approaches such as waterfall. And why is this a good idea? Well, because it helps us limit WIP. It helps us limit the work in progress. In the case of approaches such as Scrum, the WIP is one and the same throughout the entire Scrum practice for a given project. So, and that WIP is actually the number of stories that we're going to deliver within each sprint, which this also means that the WIP limit is different from one iteration to the next, from one sprint to the next. But nonetheless, we have that limit that allows us to keep, a good level of discipline and control. Also, looks like there's a typo here. It says small batch. It will be a small batch. So the fact of having small batches of work to do also makes it easier for us to do things better. So that means it helps us increase quality and the periodic delivery of what we are doing to the customer. So those are nice things to have. Those are important aspects that are making Agile approaches much more attractive to both the organization internally and to customers. But there is a small detail here. One size doesn't fit all. And what does that mean? What that means is that, as we go about going through this practice of having a set amount of time to be able to create value and deliver to the customer, it sounds very nice in theory. In practice, it's a little bit difficult. It doesn't take long for teams to start running into certain considerations, such as, okay, what will happen if we have a large feature that we need to work on? Well, we break it down into stories. And then we want to be able to deliver that feature at the end of the cycle. But sometimes the feature is just a little too big or way bigger to fit into that cycle. Then we have to become creative about how we're going to do that. And this can become problematic. So one problem could be, for example, we have a feature, we try to break it down in a way that we can actually deliver portions of it after each cycle. And what we realize is that it just makes a lot more difficult to implement that feature. So breaking it down to be able to comply with our discipline makes it difficult to actually do the implementation and deliver to the customer. So sometimes the sprint is too long. It's too short. Now, sometimes the sprint could be too long. We could have a feature that we want to deliver, by a certain desirable date, and that date is a lot shorter than the next delivery date based on our cycles. So that can also become a little bit of a problem. And that could even become a big problem. And that's particularly the case of urgent tasks. So let's say that we're at the beginning of a cycle and something happens that requires not only immediate attention, but immediate delivery. Then obviously it doesn't make sense. And I'm sure that no team and no leader will accept the fact of, the strategy of saying, let's take care of it and then we deliver this at the end of the cycle, when the cycle is far away and it will be too costly. So then what teams typically do is do what is important, which is we deliver this value as soon as possible. And that means that they have to get outside that discipline that they have already established. I have seen some teams that what they do is actually they go about changing the size of their cycle. So let's say that they originally have like a 3-week cycle, and because of some specific customer needs, they decide to change that cycle back down to 1 week. And once they deliver that value, then they go back to the 3-week cycle. So basically, they are fluctuating, and that actually can bring a lot of problems in terms of being able to have a set expectation from the customer, being able to have a set discipline within the team for people to work in a way that they're actually performing the best possible way. So this can be problematic. And, well, what I mentioned already, so we can break things down, but it can become very, very difficult to implement when we break things, smaller than a certain size. So what can we do? What could be alternatives to this? So I already mentioned the variable speeds. We can change the size of our cycle. Another strategy that can be used is we can actually change the kind of requirements that we develop. So if we are using user stories to begin with, it can be a matter of saying, well, we are not changing our cycle, this feature is too large, and we cannot deliver the feature within the cycle. So what we can do is actually start breaking it down based on technical functionality or technical development that can be accomplished within a cycle, and then at the next cycle, we start working on other technical specifications and so on until we finish the actual feature. And another strategy, which is more common, is we just allow that story or that feature, that MMS, to just go through several iterations until it is done. And of course, I mean, we do that because we need to do it. There's no choice. That's the way the real world works. But then, if we do that, we are not really, following the concept of time boxing. We're kind of breaking the rules in a way in order to be able to comply with what we need to do in the real world. So what can we do then if we have this situation? And what we can do is actually to decouple activities. And what does this mean? What this means is that what we can do, for example, is if we have our process, in this case represented with a Kanban board, we can decouple, we can change the time at which we do the activities that have to do with the customer, like the previous activities, such as generating requirements, figuring out the priorities, and so on, from the time and the rhythm, the pace at which we go about doing the implementation in itself, and then we can do the same towards the deployment. So, so what this means is that this gives us a lot more flexibility, more versatility to be able to deliver value much better. And that's why we call this decoupling. Even at activities that are, prior to the implementation, such as planning, estimation, we can do a pretty nice amount of decoupling. Now, instead of talking about minimal marketable features or MMFs, what we could consider is an alternative, which is minimal marketable release. And what does this mean? What this means is that instead of focusing on saying we want to just make sure that we have a very nice value flow and that we deliver to the customer based on that flow. What we want to do with minimum marketable releases is say, let's deliver to the customer based in what actually makes sense from the standpoint of the transaction cost of the release. That is, if we just release based on MMFs, for example, or on every cycle that we have, what we're doing is we're delivering what we finished. but that doesn't necessarily mean that what we finished is what the customer needs at that moment, or what we finished is not a coherent set of features that the customer can use. And of course, yes, within some agile practices, what we say is what we finish is potentially shippable to the customer. So obviously, we don't deliver to the customer something he or she cannot use. Nonetheless, still that discipline of release is based on the time of the cycle time, or the MMFs that we're getting done. In this case, what we want to do is say, what is that set of features that we can put together as an MMR and then deliver it to the customer? And that delivery to the customer is entirely decoupled from the rhythm, the pace at which we are actually doing the implementation itself. This is actually very important because transaction costs go down. An example here in terms of how we can handle decoupling within a Kanban board in a visible way is if you observe this in this image. On the left-hand side, we have large green stickies or post-its, and then towards the middle of the board, we have smaller yellow ones. So what is happening in this case is that what we have is we get the specifications from the customer, the large green stickies, in the form of MMFs or MMRs, and then we break them down into tasks that make sense from the implementation standpoint. And then those tasks, the implementation is done at the pace that it needs to be done. Once they are finished, then we take the green sticky and we say, okay, everything that needed to be done for that MMF or MMR to be ready is done, and we pass to the other side of the board, to the right-hand side. And then once we have the right set of those MMFs or MMRs ready, then we go about doing the deployment to the customer. So what we have here is that what we are receiving from the customer comes at a certain pace that is entirely decoupled from the pace at which we are taking the task, we are implementing it, and that is at the same time entirely independent from the pace at which we are going to be deploying that to the customer. And this has some very interesting advantages. So for example, what can happen is if we tell the customer, it doesn't matter when you go about doing your prioritization and when you do your planning and when you do your estimates at your level, communicating with what will be the equivalent to the PO or a manager, or whoever is in charge of interacting with the customer, you guys can do your part at your own pace. The only aspect that is important is that we always are going to have work to do. So as long as we accomplish that, then we really don't care how and when you do your part. And then we go about doing our work, and then we get it ready, and then when it makes sense to deliver something to you, when it makes sense from the standpoint of what we're delivering and the time of the delivery, then we'll do that. And this is something that has had a very nice impact, because what customers realize is now I have more flexibility. Before, I had to be very careful about not letting things go, and sometimes I'm too busy and I don't have the time to pay attention to it, or sometimes I have the time, but the time that I have right now available to work on this doesn't match the time that team has set for us to working on this prioritization and planning and so on. So then it becomes a little bit difficult for the customer to be able to help us, create the product. But this decoupling actually has that very nice advantage. This behavior actually happened within the first implementations of Kanban, such as the one that David Anderson did at Corbis. And I an experience myself with a telecom company in which they had a synchronization problem. In this case, not before or after, which was an interesting case. What this customer had was somewhere in the middle of their process, they had a dependency with some of their providers. And their original visualization in the Kanban board was just to have a section of a column where they say provider. And everything was just, you know, just a large number of stickers just there on that section. So I went to help them out, and what we did was fine-grain what that dependency with providers meant. And what we realized was that there were two different large sets of dependencies. One of them was internal, another one was actual external providers. But also different providers had different behavior. So what we did was visualize that, meaning we separated and we had a specific dedicated section of the Kanban board for each provider. And this allowed us to understand better which providers were performing substandard and which ones weren't. And that allowed this telecom company to go to their providers, talk to them, made them realize the impact that that was having on this telecom and on the telecom's customers. So what they realized was that if they decouple the dependency between what the providers were doing and what the telecom company was doing, they will increase the customer satisfaction. And it did. So basically, this change is something that contributed to them going from an 87% response in time to a 99% response in time. And also the decoupling between the tickets that they receive from their customers to the release allowed the team to actually work far less hours. So their decreasing less in hours was of about 6 to 7 hours per week of less work time and with much better delivery. So there was definitely a big management gain with doing these kind of changes. So then what happens if the priorities are being changed before being given to the team, and then the tasks are given to the team based on priorities, the decoupling allows the change priority to actually happen last minute, right before the team takes on the tasks. The planning can happen at different stages, at different times, and at different levels. And this is very nice because this is entirely in agreement with what Agile brings on the table, which is, you know, focus on the planning, not on the plan, and then do the right level of planning, you know, at the right time. And then estimation can happen in different ways. It can be at the beginning, you know, with the customer. Then once a team member or a group of teammates are going to start working on a task, they can do an estimate right before working on it. The advantage of doing this is that it allows the team to know whether that task is too big or not, and whether or not it makes sense to implement it in that way. If it is too big and it can be broken down into smaller pieces, then they do that, consulting with the customer. And doing that has the advantage that the customer, over time, also gets an idea of what is a nice size for a task, and then starts adjusting to it. So this has a double effect. Now, it doesn't matter in what size the feature is, because it's going to take the amount of time that it takes to be ready, independently of when delivery to customer happens. The specific task, the delivery will be the next one once it is finished. So what we can see here is also a strategy in which what we can have is we can set a visualization in our board that allows us to see different service agreements, in which we say, for example, we have two teams working on tasks, they have a different workload, and then we have dedicated amount of work for other kinds of activities, such as maintenance work or defects. The advantage of doing this is that we can start quantifying the behavior, utilizing something like control charts. The advantage of using control charts is that they allow us to know how long it's taking for each task to be finished. That is, it allows us to see the cycle time, or if you want to quantify also the lead time for each task. This allows us to do two things. One of them is to identify the cause of problems if they occur. Meaning, if I know how long it took for a certain task to be done, and I have a log on the behavior behind that task, then I will be able to identify if an outlier was an outlier because there was no choice or because certain events happened. We could actually see for future instances so that it's taking less and less for us to build to get things done. The other usage of the control chart is that we can actually observe based on degrees of confidence when we can deliver to the customer. And this is, we can compare this to the sigma calculations. So if we, for example, first degree of confidence, then we can tell the customer, I can deliver to you with X amount of certainty. In the case of the first degree of confidence, about 84% of confidence that I will deliver to you this kind of task or this kind of minimum actionable releases in this amount of time. So what that means is we could say, for example, the kind of tasks that one takes takes to develop, the delivery to the customer will be say every 3 days. For the team 2 will be every 2 weeks. Maintenance will be every hours. For this it will be every 4 days or so. So basically what this means is, as we get a minimum marketable feature ready, we're going to be able to deliver to you with a degree of confidence in that amount of time. And what this does is the customer will be a lot happier because we are bringing value based on the importance of that value, and also based on what makes more economic sense from the delivery standpoint. And this is something actually brings a lot of amazing degree of trust from the customer, and also helps have better control over costs. Something that we need to take into account when we're doing this is that we have to sample the entire data. If we don't do that, we will be inclined to think about it as a big, nice Gaussian curve that is even. Because in the real world, that doesn't happen. What we observe in the real world is that there is outliers that are going to happen, and more often than not, they are less happening, farther down the road. So as you can see, for example, on the first of these diagrams, we see that the highest bars are between 3 and 5, and then it goes almost flat, and then all of a sudden, over on day 30, there's a small peak. And we see a similar peak here on the other diagrams. So we need to make sure that for us to make a calculation to tell the customer what degree of confidence we have to deliver, value takes into account those outliers. Otherwise, we're going to be over-promising and under-delivering. So, in conclusion, decoupling is very advantageous because it allows the different sections of a process, the different stakeholders of our process to be able to work at the time that is best for them without damaging the rest of the process. and gives us the advantage of not having to depend on a set rhythm or pace or cadence for the entire process. So what that does is that allows us to do a better prioritization, that gives us better room for planning, because we don't need to rush things out to be able to get to the team when it's ready to go to the next cycle. Iteration can happen at different times, different degrees of granularity, depending on where we are within the process. Deployment happens when it makes the most economic sense based on what we are releasing to the customer. And implementation happens at its own pace, and breaking tasks into the sites that actually makes better sense from the technical standpoint. And the results are, well, higher customer satisfaction. They're definitely happier, see a better response. As I compare these to the laundry service, in which I don't wash my clothes, and what I do is I use a laundry service to take care of everything that I need to be washed. And they tell me, oh, this is NASA, we'll be happy to help you out, and we'll give you your clothes back every third day. And every third day sounds good, for some clothing, my pants, underwear, and so on. But if I give them like bed sheets and tablecloth and curtains, it just really doesn't make sense. And if the laundry service tells me, okay, Massa, then we're going to give you, we'll bring your clothes back every 3 weeks, that may work fine, for the tablecloth and for the bed sheets, but not for my, for my shirts and T-shirts and such. So the decoupling allows me to have these different sets of agreement, in which instead of having to deliver everything on a fixed amount of time, different kinds of things are being delivered in different amounts of time. This also implies less work for the customer, obviously, because he or she doesn't have to go about making extra efforts to comply with the discipline that was established. The dependency is lower, and obviously the team becomes more productive because they don't have to dedicate time in the effort of, for example, making things smaller to be able to fix them, to fit them within a time box that was set. So it has all those advantages. And so this is all I have for you guys. And I think we're ready for Q&A. I think we have plenty of room for questions.
Thank you, Masa. That was a great presentation, and I'm sure that everybody who is currently using Scrum would have found it very, very fascinating. Having worked on Swift-Kanban's implementation for over a year, and also just interacting with so many different customers as they continue to explore various agile methods and look at a more effective way to make their overall organization agile. This is going to be a very, very useful presentation from that point of view. So let me. There are a number of questions that have come in. So let me go ahead and get started with one of my own. And which is that if you were to, if you were advising a Scrum team on sort of the most effective way to adopt Kanban and to look at, moving away from a time box or an iteration to a cadence-based approach, what would be some sort of key things you would tell them in terms of simply planning the cadences? Would you look at multiple cadences for different types of events on the project, or would you look at a specific approach?
I would say that there is no such a thing as the most effective approach, because we have to take into account each particular situation. Different teams, different organizations have of practices. There's a culture already established that we need to take into account, in addition to taking into account the customer's needs. So that said, one approach that many teams are doing is doing a gentle transition in which we have a Scrum and let's start bringing into our Scrum practice some elements of Kanban. And the elements of Kanban that are brought earlier are such a thing as the whip. Instead of having one whip for the entire Scrum, for an entire process within Scrum, what we do is then establish whips for each part of my Scrum process. And what that does is that's going to allow me to have a better flow of those tasks. What else makes to do is to generate a different cadence, a different rhythm for different kinds of tasks. I will say that probably the most important one to work on is the urgent task. So instead of having to treat my urgent tasks out as a Scrum, let's agree on a set of behavior that we want to be followed when an urgent task happens. So what that is going to do is that instead of trying to do it ad hoc, which is the way we are used to think of tasks that are off the ordinary, we are already going to put a discipline in place. And what that means, obviously, is that that urgent task is going to have a different cadence from the cadence of the rest of my Scrum. That will be a very nice starting point, because once that benefit is seen, it will be easier to say, okay, what about the rest? What can we do with all the other tasks that we have so that we can actually start bringing this idea of what makes sense to deliver when? So I think that will be probably a good starting point.
Great. One of the other questions that I commonly hear about is, the difference in the way that Scrum and Kanban handle long-running tasks. People are not sure about what to do with long-running tasks when it comes to a Kanban board. Is there a different approach that can be followed for such tasks?
I am not sure if I follow the question. What I understand is, like if I have a task that are particularly large, how do I let the customer know when the delivery is? Is that what you're asking?
That's right. So they're working on some large scope task which is not been broken down into smaller user stories, or it simply has a larger elapsed time. So one of either of those two situations.
Okay. So I think is maybe the message hasn't been broadcasted correctly. I mean, in Kanban, we don't mean to say that we don't break things down. We actually do. The other thing that we do is that we make sure that we don't break them down in chunks that make it harder to implement. We want to take a task and make it as simple to implement as possible. And obviously, it's easier to implement it if you break it down into easier to handle pieces. So definitely, yes. I mean, we do that. The only aspect is that we understand that if there is a task that is of a larger size than others, and breaking it smaller pieces will make it harder, then we just don't do that. It's going to take that amount of time that it's going to take to get it done. So the discipline from the team is not the sense of urgency in terms of I have to finish this by this date, by the end of my cycle, which is a nice way to, implicitly bring sense of urgency and discipline in the team. But in the case of Kanban, the urgency is I know that this needs to get done, and I'm going to do, the right thing to get it done the right way at the right time. So yes, this, in a sense, it means that it requires the team to have, a good degree of maturity. But at the same time, leaders have to trust and guide teams to be able to have that discipline in place.
Thanks, Masa. Another question that has come in, and this is something that we've also recently I've recently read about in blogs as well, is that if I'm a Scrum team and I am adopting Kanban, am I following a Scrumban method? Is there a body of knowledge around Scrumban which I could read up on?
Yeah, I mean, there is the Scrumban book, which is, the best reference. And aside from that, there is discussions at the different groups. They're having presentations at different conferences. If you look at the proceedings, you will be able to find some source of information. I don't know if other formal books on Scrumban other than that. But that's a very nice introduction. Henry Niebuhr also has a nice writing on the internet that you can find very easily. So those will be good points of reference to follow.
Okay, great. Another question just came in, Masa, which I think again is interesting from the way people have looked at adopting class of service as a way to facilitate adopting Scrum. That if you look at the class of service definitions, there is the fixed delivery date as a class of service. Can the fixed delivery date class of service be used to define different iterations for different dates, and look at associating different user stories or cards with different fixed delivery dates which correspond to each of the iterations or a release? Is that a good way to potentially look at managing iterations or releases using Kanban?
Well, that's a really good question, because the fact that we say that iterationless, means here that okay, that means it's an open end, and I can finish whenever, which means never finish. And I think the fear comes more from the leaders and customer standpoint when we talk about this. But when we talk about Kanban being iterationless, we don't necessarily mean that there's never an end. There's actually a discipline of delivery behind that. So the purpose of the fixed delivery date is not to say, hey, we need to finish everything by this day and then everything comes to fixed delivery date task. No, the purpose of the fixed delivery date task is for specific actions or tasks that have a real hard deadline, not just to say a release date, but to say, for example, say, we need to make sure that for the coming, Agile conference, we're going to have a booth where we're going to be showing the new feature of our product, and that feature needs to be ready. Or with our press release, we need to make sure that what we're announcing on the press release will be ready, because customers are going to go and look at it. But that doesn't mean that, we're going to put everything from the entire product as fixed delivery date. Fixed delivery date tasks should be a few within the life of a project, and everything else should be just regular tasks. Again, if we have a discipline of how we're performing what we're doing, then that should be. Imagine that you have in a Scrum structure, and your team is already used to having this 2 or 3 week cycle. And all of a sudden you say, you know what, guys, there's no more sprints. The team really has a discipline in which they know, that they can get things ready within a certain amount of time. The only difference that will happen when you remove the sprint delivery within your team is that, you won't have that difficulty of in the sprint. Now I don't have to break it down. It's not 2 or 1.5, and that's fine. But the team will follow the discipline. So that means then that delivery date at the end of the sprint is no longer. So it's the same mindset. It's a matter of bringing the discipline into the organization.
Excellent. So really, that is not the sort of effective way to do it. Better to look at the overall principle of continuous delivery and plan the project accordingly. One other question that I think a couple of people have asked, which we have seen ourselves as an ISV, is that how do you best educate or best provide either senior management within your own company or to an external customer a good sense of how, what is the way that value would be maximized using Kanban without having to worry about the fact that you don't have now a specific set of dates on which you have releases defined, in which you have a very clear idea of which features will come in that each release. I get this question from my own CEO a number of times as we have moved along in our agile journey from being an iterative to Scrum to a combination of iterative and Kanban. Is if somebody wants visibility as to what is going to come in the next major release, how do you counter that by saying that tell me what is important to you and I will deliver that to you rather than having to tell you something up front about what's going to come 6 months down the line? What is the best way to tackle such questions from the management?
Okay, so I understood these as two questions. So one of them is how do I convince the senior management and the customer of the benefits of doing this, and the other one is how do I tell them what's coming in the next release? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so actually these are very interesting, important thoughts. Top-down buy-in is much better than bottom-up approach. In the early days of Agile and Lean, bottom-up was the way to go because people were just trying to figure out new ways to do things, and they were just playing around to see if it worked. And once they knew that it worked, it started being spread, and other teams started doing the same, with the hope that management will realize the benefits and then go for it, just accepting it. But today, after all these years, there are so many cases from so many different companies, different nature and sizes, that it's easier to bring it directly to top management because we have already ways to prove that it works. The kind of benefits that it brings, and so on. So, something that I do in my practice is I offer to either specific companies or I organize events where I bring top management from different companies to give them anything between a 3 and 4 hour seminar to explain to them about the benefits it has. So they will not learn Agile or Kanban or anything like that. They won't learn it, but they will get an understanding of why it can help them out. And then from there, it's just a matter of them saying, okay, now let's explore it, and then let's see if we want to go for it. But I think a very good strategy is to be able to have this gentle introduction to them, for them to have that, like their toe in the water, so to speak. In terms of the next release, again, we are seeing the progress that we're having on the task within our board, so we have visualization. We also have quantification that just to see for different kinds of tasks of different sizes, how long it takes us to get them ready. So what that means, and also there's some diagrams, for example, the cumulative flow diagram, that once we have enough behavior within the project, we are able to make projections and we have predictability that not only allows us to tell the customer what is most likely to come when, but also allows us to adjust the way we're doing the work so that we can actually make things go better if for some reason we're going slower than we should, if there's a way to improve that. So using the visualization and quantification that we have at hand, we can give an expectation to the customer. And then, as I mentioned at the end of the presentation, we can set degrees of confidence. So we'll tell the customer, for example, with 84% of confidence, tasks that are of this size will be delivered to you, within this amount of time. So this particular release that you're asking for will be ready, within this amount of time or within this date. What we have to understand is that giving an absolute, fixed date can be a little bit arrogant, and it can stop us on the back. So we can set a degree of confidence, and customers at the end appreciate it much better, because that degree of honesty, if they're actually accomplishing it, brings better satisfaction.
Fantastic. Actually, and that has exactly been our experience as well, Masa. We have over the last nearly 12 months now, as we have adopted Kanban completely in our own organization. It started with being very uncertain about what was going to come out in a release, to now being able to demonstrate over a number of release cycles that we have not only been able to show that we are able to come out with more frequent releases, that we are able to respond to customer requests for changes or enhancements much more effectively, and at the same time, show to internal stakeholders that what we're delivering is of value, so that you don't have to worry anymore about a longer release cycle and upfront decision making and risk taking that's required in order to decide what the market wants. You can be much closer to the time frame of when the market needs something, and actually focus on what is of priority to your actual customers. So therefore, for the customers also, there is tremendous benefit in not having to freeze requirements, so to speak, upfront, but be able to say what is the priority now, and focus continuously on what is going to provide maximum value, or what is going to provide what is going to cause maximum cost of delay, and based on that, continuously reprioritize things that need to be done, and therefore respond to the markets much more effectively. So with that, Masa, I think we are out of time nearly, and I think there may be a few more questions, but we'll have to take that offline. What I'd like to do is to request all attendees, if you have any questions, to please email those to us at either of the two email addresses that are being displayed on the screen right now, and that we will be providing you a copy of the slides that were presented today, as well as a link to the recording. I would like to also say that there might have been an audio problem at the beginning of the conference, and some of you might have faced that through the conference, and I'd like to apologize for that. We will make sure to do the same webinar another time, because there's just tremendous amount of interest in organizations that are currently doing either iterative or Scrum or other time box based methods, and would like to understand how Kanban provides a completely different way of managing their work, and at the same time delivering value to the customers in a far more effective manner. Masa, thank you so much for the presentation today, and with that, I'd like to close out the call today. Thanks a lot to all the participants for joining in today, and we hope to hear from you, as well as to meet again on another webinar like this again. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody, and I saw some familiar names here on the list. Hello everybody whom I know, and thanks everybody, and just feel free to send us emails with your questions. Goodbye.